As we move along now, as of January of 2024, the U.S. beef herd was at 28.2 million cattle. During the latest peak of the cattle cycle back in 2019, the U.S. beef herd inventory reached 31.6 million cattle. That's a drop of 3.4 million cattle, or roughly 11% of the whole inventory in just 5 years. Now, will we see the U.S. beef industry rebuild to the same inventory that we saw back in 2019 anytime soon? According to a Nebraska Extension Educator, the answer is not likely. Market Journal's Bill Dodd has this story.
Many factors will affect the size of the U.S. beef cow herd at the next peak. It should be considered that beef on dairy crosses will likely affect the cow herd expansion. While there are several reasons that we may not see the same inventory as 2019, it's still apparent that the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic are still playing out in the beef industry. However, by the time the pandemic had hit, many already thought it may be time to reduce the U.S. beef cow herd inventory.
Yes, so I believe 2020 was a year in which the industry looked to shrink because of the challenges of the pandemic, bringing down prices as cattle were ready to be processed and they could not move on account of bottlenecks at the packing plants because of the situations on health and so forth related to the pandemic. So that factor of that year contributed to slowing down production from that year on down. We were already facing perhaps the largest cow herd since the previous cycle, which would have been sometime in 2014, in that year. And so it was time to begin to shrink it, if you will, because we probably had overproduction of beef. We were reaching that point. So 2020 did not help in the fact that prices were depressed. Producers began to consider slowing down production in whatever way they could. Drought did not help, slowing down production a little further and forcing herd liquidation starting in 2022. There's questions out there about beef on dairy. I believe most of the individuals that are involved in this have recognized that the production of those cattle is already been absorbed by the system. Certainly, the crosses of beef on dairy cows have helped to add pounds to the mix, but the actual numbers have not increased dramatically from what we had when they were straight-bred Holsteins. And so what we see into the future is probably somewhere between 30 to 40% of the dairy cows in this country being bred to Angus or other beef breed sires that could then enhance both the quality and the amount of beef that is produced from that industry. But this has already been happening for about 5 to 10 years.
When it comes to understanding the cost of preparing for herd expansion, the heifer development program conducted at UNL's Haskell Agricultural Laboratory in Concord has been hard at work providing detailed analysis of the process of growing replacement heifers.
I believe that some of the efforts at Haskell Lab to understand the costs associated with raising replacement heifers for producers that want to expand the herd when the time comes for expansion, and we do not believe the fall of 2024 is quite that time yet, mainly because prices are doing what they're doing. In essence, they're too attractive for people to want to retain heifers, and we need a few other things changing, perhaps a greater forage supply, which we were doing good in 2024, but of course the drought later in the summer forced producers to rethink that. But I think what we're doing at the Haskell Lab at the moment is really helping a producer consider all of the costs involved in raising heifers, which our previous experience from the 2023-2024 production cycle indicated that this can be accomplished for a grand total of about $2,500 per pregnancy or pregnant heifer going into production. That is a good start, and that's a very competitive number. The question is whether that number can allow a producer to pay and amortize a heifer coming into a cow in the next 5 to 10 years of the next cycle, or predictions out of that is, and that what we're learning at the Haskell lab with the heifer replacement or heifer development program will help us guide producers on what factors they need to consider as they're trying to expand their herds.
When thinking of herd expansion, keeping a good rapport with your veterinarian will be essential. As we head into the winter months and the new year, the biggest factor cattle producers should be focused on is the health and well-being of their herd.
One of the challenges that the industry faces, and we're beginning to see, I guess, the weather turning cold. And so our assets, in this case, cattle assets, of course, are the things we must protect going forth. Anything we need to do to keep these cattle alive and progressing on a good path to be able to breed and get ready to become mothers of the next generation of cattle. Generally, we're challenged at birth and soon after with diarrhea and some other challenges. Later, as cattle progress or calves progress into weaning, that could be a respiratory challenge and later reproductive challenges. So I think producers need to consider what are the greatest health challenges to their system so that they can address that with their veterinarian way ahead of time and try to save as many calves, female calves in this particular case, as possible so that it might make a smoother transition, a less expensive transition as they select heifers for the next generation of cows.
Overall, many factors will impact the size of the U.S. beef cow herd at the next peak. Although it's difficult to predict, it's likely the industry will expect modest expansion during the next and ensuing cattle cycles. Reporting for Market Journal, I'm Bill Dodd.